Welcome to Broad Eye, the podcast that explores knowledge gaps in ophthalmology and eye care. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Broad Eye podcast. My name is Sean Maloney, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Dr. Bruno Fernandez. Bruno, how are we doing today?
How's it going, Sean? Very happy to have my friend Carlos with us today.
There you go. I didn't even get to introduce him yet. So Dr. Carlos Quezada, he is a senior medical director at Genentech. Among other things, he's also a retina specialist by training, a father, a husband, and a longtime friend of both Bruno and I. So Carlos, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here, Sean and Bruno. And, I think that out of all the titles and whatnot, of course, only second to being a father, the most important title I have is being your friend. So thank you so much for having me here. It's fun. I'm excited about it.
Good, man. Good. Well, we had this conversation back in, back at the beginning of March of 2021, and when we're getting the podcast going, it was actually you that kind of gave Bruno and I that kick in the ass and said, I think I just swore on the podcast, but gave us that kick in the ass to get this going. And you're someone who is very, has strong opinions about education and just equality and all these wonderful things in medicine. So you said, get the podcast going. You guys can do this, and I'll be your first guest. So I think you're like guest number 50. You were hard to nail down for a time, but here we are. So I wanted just to maybe ask you to give a little background on who you are. Just some of the training that you've had as a clinician, and what you're doing now professionally.
Absolutely, Sean. So, first of all, I do want to, congratulate both you and Bruno for actually, taking the leap and getting the podcast going. I'm actually a fan of it, and you've had great people on the podcast. So I'm actually happy and, and honored to be here with you guys. So, keep it going. And then, about myself, I think that, you cover the most important things when you were, kindly introducing myself. As of me, I guess, I was born and raised in Mexico in a city called Torreon. It's a beautiful city in the middle of the north of Mexico, right in the desert. And I guess some people especially people from Mexico, might debate with me whether it's a beautiful city or not. But, I certainly think of it as a beautiful city where most of my family is actually still based. I did my medical education over there, and then I went to Mexico City. I did a fellowship in gastrointestinal surgery and hepatic surgery. At that point of my life, actually, I wanted to become a liver transplant surgeon. And then after that, I did my ophthalmology residency in Mexico City, and then I did my first surgical fellowship in vitreoretinal diseases in Mexico City as well. And around that time, I think that I've done martial arts pretty much most of my life. And at that time, actually, I had the fortune of meeting Bruno, and it was kind of a mixture of. It was really serendipity. I want to think, and I think that of course, being ophthalmologists, both of us, that was certainly of interest. But the thing that actually, got us even closer was actually martial arts. And then, just talking over a few beers, I think at that point of time, I was really, I was always really interested in research, and I wanted to come to North America to do a fellowship and get back to Mexico and kind of apply some of the learnings over there. And that's how basically the idea of doing an ocular pathology fellowship at McGill came to be. And so my next step after Mexico City was being in Montreal, where I got, the fortune to meet you, Sean, as well. It was, one of the most amazing times that we actually had as a couple, my wife, Ceci and I, and, me individually, just learning about ocular pathology, doing research, and most importantly, the friendships that we were able to forge, and of course, you and Bruno were, an amazing part of it. I still remember that, surprise birthday party that you threw for me. That was really awesome. And of course, singing Don't Stop Me Now was a lot of fun as well. And then after that, I went to Santa Barbara, and I was fortunate enough to be there with a private practice group. That's the California Retina Consultants, where, you know, some people who I admired a lot, and I had read a lot about them, their papers, you know, since I was a resident, were kind enough to accept me as a fellow. So I spent some time with them before coming back to Torreon, my hometown. So then, you know, I went back to Torreon, started my own private practice. You know, I started with a multi-specialty group, and then kind of started expanding a little bit, and opened an office in Monterrey, which is a city that's close by to Torreon. And I practiced there for about three or 4 years, I think, before, you know, I came back to the States to work for Genentech, where I'm currently working at. I'm right now, my work is as a clinical science leader. More recently, you know, I've been working on faricimab, and now I'm working on the port delivery system that are, you know, in phase 3 right now. And I still keep, you know, kind of you know, one leg in practice still. So I still go to see patients in Monterrey. Of course, you know, COVID-19 came to change pretty much everything, right? How we parent, how, you know, we keep in touch with friends, and certainly how we practice medicine as well, and how, in particular, you know, to me, how we combine this, you know, working in research in industry, in biotech, and how do I keep, you know, kind of my clinical, you know, practice going on as well. So maybe I diverted a little bit, but, you know, that's kind of in a nutshell the you know, kind of the road that has gotten me here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love how you casually, you know, like, I mean, speak about your accomplishment, but like, I mean, like having it, like, you know, your clinic, it's accomplishment of a lifetime for a lot of ophthalmologists, you know, like, I mean, and then having the job you have at Genentech, it's also like, I mean, a lifetime achievement for most people. Like, and you happen to have both. Can you get some more color, man? Like, I mean, how does it work? Like, I mean, for you to have a clinic and manage, like, I mean, living in a different country.
Thanks, Bruno. Thanks so much for those kind words. And absolutely, I think it's, you know, I have to say it's not because of me. It's just because of again, you know, I just feel that I've been very lucky, you know, to have, you know, friends and family who are extremely supportive. You know, I think that, you know, I wouldn't be able to actually keep the clinical practice going without the support of all my, you know, teammates and you know, friends at Genentech who are supportive of me keep doing this. And that was, you know, kind of one of the things that you know, when I joined Genentech, I said, you know, I'm very interested. I love research, and I would love to come and, you know, work with you guys and learn more about this and whatnot. But I'm not ready to give up, you know, seeing patients, and I'm not ready yet. So I joined Genentech 6 years ago, and I think just, you know, the fact that I've been there for 6 years, I kind of speaks a lot to how much I've enjoyed the challenges and the learning experiences that I've had. But also, you know, being able to keep that practice going, it's been one of the things that really, you know, kind of grounds me and gives me the energy to keep going, honestly. And then for the practice, you know, I think I'm lucky enough, you know, in Monterrey actually. So my father-in-law, he's an ophthalmologist, and he's an anterior segment surgeon. And I have you know, a great friend as well who's a retina specialist, Samantha Salinas in Mexico, in Monterrey, you know, who help us out as well. And that's, you know, that's pretty much, you know, kind of the recipe for how lucky I think I am. And of course, you know, the trust that, you know, many of the patients you know, have in me, it's something that I take very seriously, and that I just feel I'm very lucky, honestly.
And like now talking about the work in the industry, right? Like, I mean, with Genentech, and this is something that like most of doctors, like, I mean, would never experience in their lifetimes, right? Like, I mean, having that close relationship with the industry, and I kind of like, now I know a little bit of it, and what I've realized so far is that the pace is strikingly different, and you know, like the corporate culture is different as well. So there's a lot of differences. Like, of course, we all strive for the same thing, like improve the lives of patients, but like, I mean, the way we work, it's remarkably different. So you've done both. You actually still do. So, like, I mean, can you share, like, I mean, what are the biggest challenges, like, I mean, that a doctor might face if they jump into that the world of industry?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many. I'm trying to think where to start, right? It's kind of a, I think that the biggest shock for me in particular was, at the beginning, jumping from, having a very structured day. Of course, you would have like an emergency case that you would have to go into the OR, late at night or something here and then, or over the weekends. But in general, you had a very structured, clinics and, the timing. So you kind of knew how and what to expect. And, tied to that is kind of that immediate gratification, I guess, or challenges, right? Because, there certainly, I mean, we human beings are this very complete living things, I guess, that, we're not only, patients who have vascular AMD for that matter, right? We're dealing with many other things, parenthood, other diseases, economic challenges and whatnot. So there are patients who, may be a little bit frustrated and make the day for a clinician, maybe not as happy, I guess, so to speak. But, at the same time, there's a lot of rewards that are, kind of very quick from, the fact that we have the ability to help these people, which honestly, for me, it's really an honor and a privilege that we have as physicians. So that kind of immediate reward, so to speak, of seeing, maybe, 40, 50 patients in a day, you kind of lose that immediately, and you jump into a world that's filled with, meetings, and you have to work, with a lot of people. As a physician, most of the time, of course, you have to work with your, with your partners in practice, if you're in private practice, or with the whole department if you're in academics, and whatnot. But now in industry, it's really, you can't be that, as a surgeon, as a physician, you can do a surgery and fix a retinal detachment and, help a patient preserve their vision, hopefully most of the times. But in industry, really, one person by themselves can accomplish nothing. And, that really reminds me about, there's this, I think there's this Chinese saying, right, that I think it was Confucius maybe, around, if you want to go far, walk with a group, in a nutshell, basically. And I think that working in industry really exemplifies that. I think, Bruno, you and I as martial artists really understand the value of, kind of one-on-one, the value of one-on-one work and the value that you as an individual can bring. But in industry, really being a team player is probably the most important quality that I think someone has to have. And it's oftentimes challenging.
Man, this is, it echoes some of our earlier conversations when you first migrated into industry. And, I've learned a lot from you over the last 5 or 6 years with you being in industry, and kind of shedding some light on everything there. One of the things I've come to appreciate in our conversations is just the complexity and how many moving parts there are in the machine that is a large pharmaceutical company trying to come up with therapies and whatnot for very devastating diseases. So I was hoping maybe you could walk us through that a little bit, that process, or as much as you can. What does that look like from the point that, okay, a disease is identified as that something needs to be targeted. A target, in the basic research side of thing has been identified, right through to drug development and approval. I know that you could probably talk about this for 4 or 5 hours, but if you give us a high level overview, like what's involved and maybe what are some of the challenges at each step of that process.
Absolutely, I'll try to be as concise as possible. So the first thing that I would say is that really, that teamwork that I was talking about when working within industry, that really kind of expands, and it's actually a reality. So industry does not work, by itself. It's really kind of one part of the puzzle. We work closely with private practices. We work closely with academics as well. We're always looking for collaboration so we can, identify precisely in early development those targets that might make sense. And that brings me a little bit to some of the projects that I've been working on, and that's a little bit of kind of the story around how faricimab came to be, to target to different molecules. So I think constantly we're looking to partner with academics and private practices as well, to learn what are the targets that make sense, and how we can actually bring them to help many people's life around the world. And then when you think about the way that we do drug development, so to speak, it's really really mirroring the different stages of clinical trials. We have our preclinical group, who's basically looking for targets, as we've mentioned. And once a target, basically out of many targets, they move into a phase 1 study. Once we get into the clinic, we basically follow the kind of the same principles around looking for safety more than anything, but also dose ranging studies as well. And we, assuming we do that, and I can actually go. I think there's a great example about this, and I think it's lampalizumab, which was a treatment that Genentech was actually developing at the time that I joined for the treatment of geographic atrophy. And to be honest, to me as a physician, was actually very one of the things that was very inspiring, when I first joined Genentech as well, because of this. Lampalizumab was just tested in phase 1, and then we had the phase 2 study, which was Mahalo, and we the company saw a signal for a potential benefit, and it was a small study, and it was the CFI positive subgroup that seemed to be experiencing a benefit of this treatment. And even with the small trial that we had, the company took a big risk and actually went on to put together a clinical development program that was very comprehensive. Not only did we, the company develop 2 registrational trials, Chrome and Spectre, but in addition to that, the company invested in 2 very large trials to study the natural history of geographic atrophy. I mean, you might know that GA, basically, at least when I was a resident back in 2005, 2006, it was kind of a very small topic in our textbooks. And we didn't really had a lot of great data around the natural history. And for me to see the level of investment in trying to understand the natural history was great. And I will never forget the day that the top-line results of Chrome and Spectre were shared. Those were negative. And kind of the feeling, everyone, and this is something that I really want to highlight as well, the fact that when we think about industry or practices or academics or whatever, it's really people who make those different industries. And I can tell you that I'm always inspired because for me, in a way, it's very easy to kind of ground the work that I do, analyzing data, designing trials and whatnot, to the patients that I see. Last week I was actually in Monterrey seeing patients, and it's easy for me to get that energy, I guess, from the patients and my willingness to serve them and bring that to work. But for the vast majority of people in industry who are not exposed to patients, they have this tremendous passion to help patients that it's just amazing for me to see. And I can tell you that I sometimes harvest that passion as well whenever I'm feeling low or something, to keep going forward. And going back to the lampalizumab story, the day that that failure was announced, there were people crying in the building. And when I was asking, I have to say this might not be true, but at least it was my impression, right? My initial thought was like, oh my God, well, maybe they're crying, because they might think, they may lose a job or something, right? Which is kind of a very fair concern. But I stopped and kind of try to understand what was happening with one of my colleagues, and she was just saying, it's unfortunate, this is a big failure. So patients with this disease will not be able to be treated, and And she was even saying, I even wonder what are the consequences that this will probably have, an investment, for trying to cure this disease. And that was a very powerful moment to me. And again, as a retina specialist, seeing that the company actually moved forward to publish the data from the registrational trials, but also from the natural history studies, the Proxima A and B, was really, really powerful, right? Because at least in my naive mind, I guess a part of my brain was still kind of thinking that there might have been this, kind of dark side, so to speak, that then they would just lose interest, and that was not the case at all. And I think that's how we get to, kind of the late stage, part of drug development through a lot of failures. But I think that people, as it is true for human history, we're always, kind of building on past failures and building for successes. And that's inspiring for me as a physician, for sure.
Yeah, and like you sort of like touched a bit already, like on the next question that I would have, right? Would be like what are the major challenges or running a clinical trial? And like I think the easy answer would say like it's everywhere. Like it's such a risk endeavor. Like to go on a clinical trial, and people usually see the success stories, right? Like, but they don't see like how many of those clinical trials fail and like how much they cost, right? And then they partially explain like why some drugs are so expensive, because like not only the clinical trials that succeed cost a lot of money, but there are the ones that fail that like also cost a lot of money, and then they didn't bring any revenue, right?
Exactly.
And so like maybe if you can like just be more specific, right? Like about clinical trials specifically. Of course, it's challenging like to recruit principal investigators and eventually like find patients that are willing, like to take on an investigative drug. And if you could maybe like get a top three, the top three challenges that a pharmaceutical company have on designing and running a clinical trial, which one would they be?
Absolutely. Well, that's a tough one, because as you noted, Bruno, there are many challenges, from the early phases of designing to, certainly the execution. There's always something that happens while we're running trials. But anyhow, so if I were to summarize it in maybe 3 or 4 points, I will probably say that the first challenge is designing the trial, right? Really having a clear in your mind, what's the objective of the trial? That's really helpful, but designing, coming to an optimal trial design, it's always challenging, because there are many people who are involved who may have different objectives out of a trial, right? So for me as a practicing clinician, I may want to have a trial design that really mirrors what I do in my clinic, but what I do in my clinic may not be acceptable for health authorities around the world. And that points out to another challenges which is when we're developing new medications or devices, globally, we have to work with many different health authorities around the world that may have different requirements and different objectives as well. So trying to find that medium ground, in that design, it's always kind of a an art, I will say, and but it's certainly something that it's really fun, and brainstorming and having all this brain power of having clinicians, health authorities, and colleagues providing their input into a trial design. It's always something important. And that comes with kind of the next challenge that I can think of right now, which is the trade-offs that you're leaving, and then how are you going to be thinking that for the future you're going to be fulfilling those gaps that you may not be answering at that point of time, because we're physicians, we want to improve patients' lives through improving their vision, but we're also scientists, so curiosity, it's something that we have, right? And if I could, I would do so many things and ask so many questions in one day, but we have to prioritize. And then the other challenge I would say would be when we're running a trial, basically the protocol becomes like the gospel truth. And that, I think, even though, we, investigators are very experienced and, very familiar with GCP rules, good clinical practice rules and whatnot, it's always challenging when, there's something that, because of an oversight or, just because of life happening, for example, a patient missing a visit or something, we have a protocol deviation, people sometimes take this personally, and it's not. And there's always that kind of challenging part of, kind of managing the relationship and, explaining the why we're doing the things, to our investigators, so I understand. So I think that people side, it's also, quite challenging. And then the third one that I would mention would be, and which I think it's the most important one, it's safety, right? I think that in medicine, there's this, the principle, right, from primum non nocere, which is, basically first, don't do harm or not to harm. I don't know the actual translation. I apologize there. And that's something that it's really on top of mind for me, and I can say that for all of our colleagues. So this is something that we take seriously, and that's the biggest challenge, because despite the fact that we get all the way to phase 3, for example, I'll give the example of faricimab, right? We had a very robust drug development program with more than 500 patients, across 2 indications in phase 2 and phase 1. You get now to, global phase 3 program with, more than 3,000 patients around the world. And you always wonder if, there's going to be something that might harm a patient. That, I think, it's one of the things that, can't keep me up at night, and many of my colleagues as well. So safety is probably the most challenging. And that's the key piece, I think, for me as a physician and as a drug developer, that, it's always of utmost importance.
Still on clinical trials, right? Like specifically, let's dive into like the ones you're involved on, and the ones you're excited about. Can you give us some color, like on the promising drugs that like you involved on, what kind of disease they treat, and how they can change the landscape, what they can like improve upon what we do already?
Absolutely. I think, well, first of all, I'll say that I feel just privileged to be living in this era where, there's a lot of interest in ophthalmology. There's a lot of different companies investing in, discovering new targets and developing new drugs as well. So I think it's really exciting. Around the things that I'm most excited about, is faricimab and PDS, and in a way, of course, I'm biased because I've been working on both of them since 2015. But I'm really excited because we had positive data readouts from our phase 3 trials for both programs, in age-related macular degeneration for both faricimab and PDS. But we also had positive data for our diabetic eye disease program in faricimab. So that's really exciting. I mean, right now we're working with health authorities around the world, and hopefully, we certainly think that the benefit risk profile is positive for both of them, and hopefully they'll be approved in the future. And I think those 2 programs actually have a very big potential of benefiting patients, in the short term. And I also think, and I hope that this positive results can actually help drive more interest into ophthalmology, so we can have more discoveries and more developments of new and better drugs that can actually help patients. So that's kind of like the latest drugs that I'm really excited about. PDS is a very innovative delivery system that really provides sustained delivery of ranibizumab over very long periods of times, and I think that can target one big need around the world, which is very close to me in Mexico, which is kind of the lack of compliance with treatment and difficulties with coming to to the office often to get injections. And then faricimab, on the other hand, as well, kind of the first multi-targeted approach with very extended dosing regimens as well, delivered by IVT injections. So those are the two things that I'm excited about. And then there's many things on the pipeline, both at Genentech and at many different companies as well, that I'm really excited. I think that in general, I'm really excited about gene therapy. It's, oftentimes with gene therapy, and, the three of us have been talking about gene therapy since like 8 years ago or something, and in many different ways. And oftentimes I feel that it's like, I get this feeling of being so close, but at the same time so far away. But I certainly think that gene therapy has the potential to, unlock a better way of treating our patients with, retinal diseases in general, and in particular for those with monogenic diseases as well. So I'm really hopeful that gene therapy will keep evolving and we'll keep learning in that field, and circumvent some of the challenges that we've had around, inflammation, the route of delivery, and of course effectiveness as well. And then the other broad topic that I'm excited about is actually machine learning. I certainly believe that machine learning, it has a lot of, just AI, I guess, in general, has a huge potential in helping humanity, in a broad level, and certainly medicine. I think that machine learning has the potential to basically help us be better physicians. And I think that, one of my mentors, I remember saying one point of time, is saying, somewhere in the world, and I say this, with a lot of respect, and, I'll put myself in that analogy, I guess, so I don't, offend anyone. It's certainly not my intention, but the saying was, somewhere in the world, the world's worst doctor has a patient who's actually waiting outside of his room, waiting to be seen. And if we can actually have machine learning help that doctor become better, and I'll talk about myself, again, if I can have machine learning help me become a better doctor and help me give better prognosis to my patients, I think that's very invaluable. Because the one question that I get the most when I see a patient who's struggling with diabetic retinopathy, for example, for the first time, it's, what's my prognosis? Am I going to get my vision back? And oftentimes we can give an estimate based on, large registrational trials around what was the mean result for the mean patient. But again, the mean patient from trials are not actually walking into my office. So it's really hard to individualize. So machine learning, I believe, can actually help us deliver this personalized healthcare that I think it's so critical.
And we've seen AI on diagnostic devices, but do you think there's some room and potential for AI to be used in drug development as well?
Yes, I think so. I hope so. And, I'm actually working closely with some of our scientists at Genentech as well. It's one of the other projects that I'm working on to try to figure out. I think, there's a lot of papers published around, whether we can actually predict treatment, outcomes for, response to anti-VEGF treatments. In particular, I'm very interested in seeing if we can actually go further and determine what's the visual potential for a given patient, just based on baseline data. And also, what would be the ideal treatment regimen? By that, I mean, what would be the least frequent regimen that can actually maximize a patient's, visual potential? So there's a lot of challenges that we still have to overcome. But I think that with the dedication of a lot of the scientists and just sharing, I think you touch upon something that I wanted to come back to, which is kind of the overall bias that we have towards publishing and even presenting positive results. But I think it's really critical that we actually kind of change our mindset, and I hope that people in industry, in academia, and in private practice, and of course peer reviewers and editors in journals as well, start publishing more negative results, because I think it's really important. As I said, I think building on our mistakes, or just, or not mistakes, but our failures as well, it's so critical. And I think for machine learning in particular, it's going to be extremely important.
I think that, you talk about building on failures, but it's not just failures, right? I mean, what you're highlighting there is just, negative results. It's just or a result that, just didn't work out the way we wanted it to. And because it doesn't, something that's not really newsworthy, then it might not get published, but it would serve the scientific community very well to be aware that, hey, this group has already tried this and it didn't really pan out to the way theoretically it would, right? So that makes a lot of sense. Carlos, it's been a lot of fun talking to you, but I have one more question before we let you get back to to managing clinical trials and patients and all the other responsibilities you have.
Baby kids.
And it's not, the question should be, how do you function on like 37 minutes of sleep a day? I'm not sure, but no. So you have a megaphone here. You have thousands of people that will hear this across the world, that are patients, that are researchers, that are clinicians. If you have, do you have any overarching messages or pieces of advice that you would like to, broadcast to a very focused community interested in ophthalmology and eye care? What would you want to say, or even if you want to segment that by group?
Oh my, it's a very comprehensive request, my dear Sean. I don't think I'm anyone to give any advice to anyone. First of all, I will say.
I'll just agree with that, man.
This is it. I know deep inside you, there's a philosopher in there somewhere. So I thought it'd be a good idea to put you on the spot on the podcast and ask for your words of wisdom for the global ophthalmology community. So what we're waiting for, we're going to sit here until you serve up something.
Oh man.
The problem with giving words of wisdom like that, it make us feel pretty old. So there we go.
Oh man. Well, I think the only piece that I can really think of is, really be true to yourself. I think that, as long as we have a clear vision about what is our objective in life, and I hope that all of us who are involved in patient care and involved in the health industry, I want to think, as you guys know, I'm a big believer of the fact that all human beings are good and have limited potential, and I think that as long as we keep the patient benefit, and we not only think about the patient, because oftentimes we just refer to the patient, but we oftentimes forget that there's a family and friends around them. I think that as long as we take that core group at the center of what wakes us up, what makes us do the things that we do, and the decisions that we make, I think that the outcome will be positive in the long term. And I hope that I can just put some a little grain of sand, as they say in Spanish. I don't know if that translated well to English, but to help someone else make a new observation that leads to a new discovery that can hopefully help patients afflicted with eye diseases. That's kind of coming from a very egocentric point of view, because of course I'm an ophthalmologist, and I'm in this mission for life. But I hope that everyone else, everyone does whatever the work they do. I think it's critical as well, from the people who are cleaning the big academic centers or industries, the clinical trial centers, to the big important physicians who are the principal investigators and whatnot. I think if we can tie it back to who are the people who we're trying to serve, I think that we can be very excited, because I think the future for human race in general is going to be very positive, and I can only hope to one day be very old and retired and with you three guys, and probably doing some jiu-jitsu, hopefully, if our joints allow us, and just seeing a very different landscape of how retinal, eye diseases in general are being treated.
And that's great. That human side of just service and patient-centric. There's just one point in what you said I'd like to correct, and is that you will never be retired. So you will be serving patients or some cause even when you're old. So but no, Carlos, listen, man, this has been fun. We're gonna have to do this again, hopefully in person soon. That would be fantastic. Get all the families together, and we can do this live. But I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your stories and words of wisdom. I think it's something that the broad eye community is certainly going to enjoy.
Well, thank you so much, my dear Sean and Bruno. I certainly am looking forward to being in person, and hopefully, if we all do our job well, we'll be able to get together soon.
Thanks for the chat, Carlos. Always good to connect with you, my man.
Absolutely. Big hug, my friends.
Take care, bro.
Take care, buddies.
And that concludes today's episode of the Broad Eye Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Of course, ratings and reviews are always welcome. And you can certainly share this episode with any of your colleagues or friends who might enjoy it. Thanks for listening.